Alrighty, folks, something I love to do is share stories of people doing work, growing what may have started as a side hustle into something quite large. In this example, we're going to talk with Bob and maybe even Holly, talk about how they took a side hustle from 0 rentals to well over 200. We're going to talk about the journey, the big steps, all of that. Bob, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning.
Absolutely, Bob. So obviously we were connected through Dion from Dion Talk. I always appreciate the referrals from Dion. And let's just get something out of the way very quickly. Bob, you are blind. Is that true?
100%, totally blind. It was a slow process. Optic nerve deterioration started about the time I was high school, 14 years old, and by the time I graduated from college, I had 100% loss of vision. So 8, 9 year, 10-year period of time, went from totally sighted to totally unsighted.
So that is obviously a part of your journey and your story, but we are not going to focus there. We're actually going to focus on your real estate journey. So today, as you sit there, you have a portfolio of over 200 units, which is quite amazing. But I would ask you to rewind the clock. Let's go back to that very, very first one. Do you remember the first one and have a story around that?
I do remember the first one. So when I graduated from high school, I launched out on my own. I had the mindset that paying rent was kind of a loss, and I just didn't want to do that. So my first time I moved out of my parents' home, I bought a little mobile home on its own separate parcel, and probably 1982, back in the day when affordability was challenging and interest rates were sky high. But anyway, I did it on an owner contract, and it didn't necessarily work out that great. It wasn't bad, but it didn't work out that great. But it got me involved and kept me interested. And then I went to college and graduated, and then I started I got involved in self-employment in the food service industry, which we can talk a little bit about that and how that all ended up being really good and was good for the real estate portfolio. But then come COVID, it collapsed. And then got involved in starting a family, but was still interested in real estate and picked up a few properties here and there, but nothing of any significance. And then in about 2003, 2004, we got involved heavily in the real estate business. And by I think April or May of 2004, we had built our portfolio up to 28 doors.
Wow. So let's go through that. Let's go through that first portion. Now, were these mainly additional mobile homes? Because that was the first one. When you're adding additional ones, what were those assets?
No, it was they were just homes that I would live in, and then I would move on, and maybe I'd continue renting them out. So that, like I said, I bought the first was just a little mobile home, kept it, rented it out for a while, and then I moved to a different market. I ended up buying a U.S. Marshal seized home.
Oh. Wow, U.S. Marshal.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. It was kind of fun. It ended up coming down to a bidding process where I think you had to bid on it kind of, I think by telephone. That was back in 1980, 1990, 1991, sometime in that time frame. We had to bid on it by telephone or some process in $500 increments. So we bought this little home that was had some issues, but it was livable, and paid $41,500 for it.
Nice.
And did that, and then I moved out of that market and then moved about 30 miles south on the I-5 corridor, and bought another home, and then kind of lived in that. But we ended up not renting out there. Then we just started buying some duplexes.
Okay.
Slowly getting in. Then, like I said, by 2003, we started getting a little more serious.
Very, very cool. So up until, let's get to 2003, 28 units. Something I didn't mention up front was, what market are we in? You're in Seattle, Bellevue. Where are we?
We're in Olympia, which is about 60 miles south of Seattle and about 100 miles north of Portland, Oregon.
Okay. All right. Just so we can level set, folks. Yeah. Very cool. So, okay, it's 2004. I don't know Olympia, but if it's anything like Fresno, California, those were, when you're in the moment, 2004 was an okay year, right? Up and to the right. Financing was relatively easy.
Yes.
A lot of opportunity. I am curious, how did Olympia fare in, like, I don't know when the pain came. Was it 06, 08, 10? When was the pain?
Probably mostly it started tipping over in 2000, late 2007. And
Okay.
then it was kind of just a slow journey down 2008, 2009, 2000, a lot of short sales, a lot of bankruptcies, a lot of fear. We went through a time period, 2009 to 2014, where real estate was like the plague, and just
Yeah.
so many people, flippers and contractors, they so many of them collapsed that they didn't want,
Yeah.
and then a lot of these millennials witnessed their parents' homes being foreclosed on, and
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
real estate was like the plague, and so there was a lot of opportunity, not a lot of competition, but financing was really, really difficult. So it had its complexities in terms of, you go back and look at some of the properties that you could have, would have, and should have
Yeah.
bought.
Yeah,
It's like, well,
absolutely.
but yeah,
Yeah. So I'm curious. Let's go back to the point of time you have 28. I'm guessing one of the things that you did in hindsight that was right is you probably financed everything with either seller financing notes or 30-year mortgages. So you didn't have any of these arms or resets. Is that a fair assumption?
that would be mostly 30 years. We had a couple 15 years to start because I was
Okay.
always I was always interested in lower interest rate.
Sure.
We did have a couple 15 years, but mostly 30-year fixed, and yeah, conservative approach to it. I think that the long-term financing is kind of the way to go. And then as we, as things progress here in recent years, the 30-year fixed mortgage became the asset
Exactly.
versus the property. So
Yeah, that is something that is quite different. A lot of people want this to be the next '08 in the '08 cycle, whatever year that was, the debt was the liability, and today the debt is the asset.
right,
It's wild. People don't understand that.
right.
It's crazy. But let's talk about because I like you, we were finding deals everywhere, but getting loans was at least traditional loans was tough. I mean, I've told a story 100 times about going to my bank who had all my money for most of my adult life, telling me to go away, right? Because real estate was the plague.
Well,
How'd you get around that?
that's just it. The thing is when you need a mortgage, the
Yeah,
banks, they're not interested in you. When you don't need the money, oh, they're willing to throw money at you left and right.
yeah.
So
True words never said. Yes, yes, yes.
fortunately, the food service business was we were fairly successful, and so the access to the down payments was okay. We didn't struggle to get down payment money, but we took out a lot of mortgages in 2007 and 2008 when banks were still able to. I know if you remember IndyMac,
I
they uh,
do.
they lent us a
Yes.
lot of money. On homes. We were just way too early to the party,
Right.
and we would have been able to wait until 2010, 2011. We would have been a lot better off. But by that time, IndyMac was they were
Yeah,
gone.
long gone.
You remember Washington Mutual?
I
They were
do. Washington
they were
Mutual, Countrywide lent me
Countrywide.
millions of dollars. Yeah,
Yeah, they were long gone. And if you remember back in those days, there was every weekend that would come around, and there were 4 or 5 banks would collapse
I
every
remember.
single weekend. So it was difficult, but we would, I don't know, every single deal was legitimate. We didn't do very much owner financing. It was mostly through
Okay.
the banks, and I think by that time it was mostly the portfolio lenders, the
Ah, okay.
Washington Federal,
So
and
they were keeping the loans on their books.
yep. Yeah, paying a
Nice.
little higher interest rate, but that it
Sure.
was okay because the prices were so attractive.
Yeah. Were you having to put 25, maybe even 30% down to get them to say yes?
Yes, and that's probably what helped us through the great financial recession in the great financial crisis in 2008 is that we weren't way over leveraged. We were
Right.
really conservative. 70 to 80% was where we'd come in, and then we were buying right. So we were okay with the valuations and stuff. Another problem is that we did buy a lot of properties in 7 and 8, and then our debt to equity ratio got out of whack. So
Yeah.
because the properties were coming down in value, and then the lenders were requiring a lot. There were more stringent criteria for their lending practices, and so they wanted to see the debt to equity ratio more attractive in their favor.
Sure.
So we were kind of a little bit crunched there, but there again, the portfolio lenders helped us. And then over the course of time, as we had this slow, gradual increase in the economy during the Obama administration,
Yeah.
The equity went up, the mortgages went down, and then we found ourselves in a pretty good position just right before COVID in 2019.
Yeah.
And that's when we started doing a bunch of refinancing. Fortunately, all that was in the works just before COVID, and then when COVID hit, we were able to pull the trigger and refinance a whole bunch of properties, and then we ended up with a whole bunch of equity in the
Yeah.
bank, and went on a little bit of a shopping spree.
There you go. There you go. So yeah. So where was the portfolio kind of pre that equity withdrawal, like in 19 or 20, whenever that happened? Were you sitting at 80, 100 units, or where was the?
We had about I think it was 117 units
Okay.
just prior to COVID. And like I said, we refinanced mostly through the portfolio lenders. We refinanced a bunch of the properties, and then we had a couple of multifamilies that we refinanced as well. And so we were coming out of 5 or 6 and 7% interest rates and coming down into the 4s and the 3s.
Yeah.
Um,
That
so
good timing.
yeah, it was good timing. So we're a little bit lucky there. And then we went and once the dust kind of settled, March, April, and May during COVID, that first 3 months when everybody was a little unsure what was going to happen, then we
Yeah.
so because I was all leveraged out in terms of single family, 1 through 4 residences, the banks weren't going to let, I had too many mortgages. So
Right.
I had to turn to commercial. So we started buying commercial properties left and right,
Hey.
So, but we didn't get ourselves, the thing is though, a lot of those borrowers in 2020, 2021, they got themselves in a little bit of trouble because
Yeah.
they got 3 or 5 year, mortgages that are gonna need to be refinanced in 3 to 5 years.
Right.
We always went 10. We kind of maxed out the 10 years. So
Yeah.
we,
Duration's a big deal. Yeah.
yeah. And from, when you're getting 3.5 or so interest rates, I want to stretch that out as far as I can.
Yeah,
So
exactly. As long as possible, please.
yeah. So we don't have to really worry about any issues until 2030. So
Yeah. There you go.
because we lived through 2008, and if you had taken a 5-year mortgage, a mortgage that was going to balloon out in 5 years, and you say like 2004,
Yeah.
good luck getting a mortgage in 2009 on your apartment complex, and there was a lot of
Oh,
pain.
a lot of pain.
So we lived through that. We experienced that, and it's like I didn't want to put myself in that position. So
That's a lesson I took from the Great Recession as well, is always go as long duration as you can.
yeah.
Right.
So we got through the Great Recession with 70s, debt to equity, 75, 80%. So we
Yeah.
continued that. Buy right,
Very cool.
you can do better. And then value add. So we're upgrading the properties as we go. So
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the cycle of commercial. So it's still in Olympia area, I'm guessing.
Yeah. So one of the major differences between you and me is we self-manage.
Yep. Okay. I like it.
And so because of that, we're all mostly in the Olympia area, right up and down the I-5 corridor from
Okay.
Olympia, and then we've migrated a little bit. Our most recent property that we bought in April was a 64-unit apartment complex in town called Centralia,
Okay.
30 miles south of Olympia. So
Oh, okay. So relatively close. Very cool.
yeah.
So I guess I'll ask this question since you've done it. You and I have both done it. Not a lot of people have. You kind of cut your teeth in small residential, singles and duplexes. Now you're upgraded to, bigger than I've ever bought. The biggest thing we ever bought was 20 units.
Okay.
What are some of the biggest differences you would tell a new person, when you have a 64 unit versus, a couple of single family homes? Because there are some big differences.
6 single family homes. If I was going to get started, I'd probably stick to the 1 to 4.
Yeah.
For financing purposes, 30-year fixed mortgages. I mean, that's one of the biggest differences. Your 30-year
Sure.
fixed versus perhaps a 10.
Right.
That's the big difference. When you have a larger community, you got to play referee a little bit if you're going to self-manage.
Yes.
So that's a big difference. The nice thing about like single family homes is you can have 2 of them on the same block, and you can have different rules.
True.
So one of them you can allow pets, the other one no. One of them you can raise the rent on, the other one you don't necessarily have to. But in a multifamily situation, you got to be a little careful. If you're going to raise rent
Yeah.
on, you kind of have to be similar or equal with the other tenant. And the rules all you got to enforce the rules on the multifamily. You got to be a little bit more strict
Yep.
on the rules and stuff.
Absolutely.
And then on the commercial over the residential, the commercial lenders, they want a lot of documentation. They want to know how that property is performing on a quarterly or annual basis.
For sure.
So you have to keep your numbers in line, which is okay. Not a big
Yeah.
deal. So
Yeah. The other thing I've seen is, and maybe it's not in Olympia, but the turnover in a multifamily is noticeably higher than single family. Is that true in Olympia?
it is. Yeah, there's more turnover. I mean, we like to try and get 3 to 4 years on a tenant, and it's
Okay.
okay if, and I'm okay if it turns over, because typically the rents get a little bit behind when the
Sure.
tenants stay too long. But that's kind of what we shoot for, 3 to 4 years. And on single family homes, yeah, they have a tendency to stay longer. But my experience is on the single family homes, a lot of time, if they can afford the single family home, they typically will end up buying. So they might move out
Yeah.
a little earlier
Okay.
too. So that's why I kind of like the duplex model.
Sure.
That you it
That's a good point.
they
I think you're right. Yeah. Duplexes through fours,
they
you got to
stay
get the
longer.
best to stay longer. You're right. I think so.
Yeah, and then you don't have the large multifamily complexities with
Yeah.
playing referee as much. Yeah.
Yeah. Playing referee. That is very well said.
And then another thing is with the duplexes, when you go to sell it, you're going to sell it to a small time investor,
Yeah.
and versus when you have a big one, there's going to be a lot less competition, and there's
Yeah.
going to be a lot less buyers. So
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the kind of pieces and parts along the process. Because again, as we said early on, you've lost your vision at a young age, and you built this entire portfolio from the first mobile home park to now buying 64 units without site. Uh, how do you? I mean, I'm just trying to think like a new investor out there. They think they have to see it, they have to touch it, inspection. They got to look at the numbers. Obviously, you're running numbers for sure.
yep.
But how do you handle all of the blocking and tackling of evaluating deals and all of that?
Yeah, I think I want to say that I'm really proficient at what I call sixth grade math, and that's add, subtract, multiply, divide, and then
Yep.
decimals, fractions, and percentages, which are all three the same thing, just displayed
Yep.
in a different way. So I'm really proficient at that, and I just use a talking calculator. That's it. I don't have a
Yeah.
fancy computer to crunch the numbers. But unfortunately, I've been doing it long enough that when it comes down to evaluating property, I want to know what I'm paying for it, what the rehab cost is going to be, and then what the potential rent's going to be. That's really
Those are the numbers, right?
those are the numbers. Those are the I already know what the interest rate's going to be, so I don't
Right.
have to worry about that. And everything else being, I mean, then once we get past the purchase price, the rehab costs, and then what the potential rent's going to be, then we'll look into the taxes and the insurance. But those are all going to be the same.
Yeah, that would be really close.
They're not going to fluctuate that much. So that's how I really evaluate the property, and then, but when I get out to look at I've a home or duplex, it's just a rectangular box, a single story.
Yeah, exactly. We overcomplicate it sometimes.
Exactly.
It's a
So
box. It's got windows. It's got doors.
yep.
Yeah.
And so I'm not afraid of doing rehabs, and I mean, we don't really do remodeling, but a lot of like the roof and the floor coverings and the paint, that's all
Yeah.
routine. That's all. I almost put that in routine maintenance, because it's going to have to get done eventually anyway.
For
So
sure.
I'm more concerned about what the kitchen looks like, the bathroom looks like, and the neighborhood, and then the layout of the property. So
Yeah.
a lot of times people go in there and they start remodeling and hacking it up and
Yeah.
turn. It's like trying to avoid that stuff, because usually the architect that that was involved in the house, they were pretty much accurate with
Yeah.
yeah. So,
Well,
but now,
let's talk about neighborhood a little bit, because
okay,
like I've shared the story. Olivia has the veto power in any deals I bring to her, and it usually was the neighborhood was the reason she vetoed it. Are there neighborhoods you just won't go into?
there's a couple of neighborhoods here in the area that I just avoid, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, but there's not that many,
Yeah.
So I don't want to get into an expensive neighborhood, and I don't want to get in the bottom neighborhoods either. So
Well said.
I try and when it comes to like the duplexes and the fourplexes, I try and find neighborhoods that's just not all multifamily, that wasn't developed as a multifamily property. Somehow they were able to work a fourplex or a duplex into it. So
Yeah.
those are always
Yeah.
attractive to me.
Those are fun, right? Infill lots, maybe a corner lot with a fourplex on it or something.
Yeah, surrounded by single family homes.
Exactly. Surrounded by single
Yeah,
family. Absolutely.
those are nice. Trying, one of the things, not necessarily the neighborhood, but where we're at right here, we're on the I-5 corridor, and I think that's a, for security purposes, stay on one of the interstates and don't
Yeah.
get too far away from it. 10 miles one way or another is good.
Yeah.
Just because I know, on on the I-5 corridor from San Diego to Bellingham, Washington, that's
Yeah.
where the growth's going to be, all up and
Yeah.
down, where the growth's been for the last 30, 40, 50 years. So it's
Yeah.
not going to change.
Don't
So
overcomplicate it. I think
right.
there's one piece of advice I take from this conversation when I think about the new investors is don't overcomplicate it, right? Sixth grade math,
Yep.
Neighborhoods, not too high, not too low.
Yep.
Beyond that, be on the main thoroughfare, I-5 up and down the West Coast.
Yep.
What's some other advice, Bob, you would give that new investor that looks at what you've done and goes, "Hey, I want to do that." What's some advice?
First of all, get involved, get serious. Probably I would recommend that they invest in their backyard, and I would probably recommend that they do like the house hack, buy a duplex or a fourplex, live in one of the units, and then rent the other 3 out.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to get started.
Yeah, watch what 30-year debt when you can.
30-year
right?
debt, 5% down if that's the way you need to go.
Yep.
Try and do as much of the work as you can as a side hustle to get it fixed up and drive the rents higher. And when you get to a point, you can refinance it and get your equity out of it, and then move on to the next property.
Yeah. And it's a long journey, right? You've been doing this 30 plus years.
Well, seriously, we've been doing it for about 20 going on. Yeah, about 20, 21 years. So that's the serious, we did get involved a little earlier than that, but not serious. So, but it is a long journey. And so just be prepared. And it comes in fits and starts. You're going to go along for a while, and there's going to be nothing, no equity growth. And then all of a sudden it just explodes. The next thing you know, it's like, wow. So, I mean, during the Great Financial Recession, there were times that we had some vacancies, and with the labor stuff, the bank account was down to, the hundreds, and now it's trying to figure out what to do with all the money at this point.
It's a nice problem to have.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
But
Well, Bob, I love the story. Sixth grade math. Didn't let sight be an excuse. You went after it. Any other just closing thoughts and maybe where people can follow you? I don't know if you have a social media following or whatnot.
I don't have a social media following. I'm pretty much a low tech type person. But if anybody would like to reach out to me, they can email me at bobgeorgemiller@gmail.com.
There you go. bobgeorgemiller@gmail.com, folks. Bob, thank you very much for doing this. Thank you for getting up early. You are wonderful. And say hi to Holly for me.
Thank you. All right, will do. Thank you.
Thank you, buddy. Bye.